Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me today on Sally Talk Live. I'm working my music little thing here. So, still learning all the little gizmos. Today is my last episode for a while that I'm going to talk about grief and getting over John's death, because I don't know, there's other things that I'd like to do and I want to move forward, but I did do this and it was important to me and important for me to do this so that that you knew where I was coming from. I wanted to make sure that a lot of things that I want to talk about, and a lot of it was based on what I'd been through. And so I wanted to share as transparent as I could about what I've been through. And so this last episode is going to do that and just wrap it up for now. And I do want to move on and get some guests on and have other people on, because I definitely like to interact with people and meet with others and respond and have other people on, so you'll get a different perspective and not just hear me talking at you. So that's the goal here. Okay, so I'm going to get right to it. I did the first two stages, which were the denial and anger. And the last three stages are bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So it's a lot to cover in one last episode, but I think I can. I've run it through a couple of times in my head, so I have notes. So I think one of the things that really was difficult for me, because I've talked before about how it was hard for me to be the attention in the center of attention, especially when it's sadness, people being sad for me and pity and all of that. That was difficult for me. And that obviously involves other people. And one of the things that really surprised me about this was how other people handled it and handled his death. Now, this is going away from the close family unit, the ones that were in the trenches. I'm talking about the friends and the friends of his and things like that. And so when you get into the bargaining stage, and what I've read about it is it's a lot of, what if, and if this had happened, and if that had happened. And there's kind of like two stages. You look at if this had happened, if that had happened, if things were different, then maybe this, which is definitely something that you do with suicide. I mean, basically all 5 stages you could go through within an hour. Something happens, you can't believe it, and then you're angry that it happened or how it was handled, and then you wish it was different, and you wish you had done something different, and then you want to go and take a nap because you're sad about it, and then eventually you have to just take a deep breath and move forward. So you could go through all 5 stages of grief in an hour, which I've done many times. But then on the broader scale and the bigger picture of it all, you kind of wallow in some of these in and out. And so the bargaining was definitely a big one that I've kind of like lived in and probably still in to some degree now. And a lot of that is just, it was the reaction of people and the reaction of a lot of his friends. We had his memorial service just a few days after his death on the Saturday. He died on a Tuesday, and we had the memorial service on a Saturday, and over 400 people came to it. And I remember thinking to myself, if all those people had reached out to him and showed him that they loved him that much, and they were so upset about losing him, would that have made a difference? And, probably not, but it's just, you just go through it. I mean, you just keep spinning and spinning and spinning these kind of things. And so it's just very difficult. So, and what it triggered in me, and I think like sneaking back into the anger stage, is that anger is not something that's very easy for me to do. I remember when I was back doing improv, and one of our exercises, and we used to perform this too, is called emotional symphony. And emotional symphony is you get the troupe together, you ask the audience for an emotion, you have a song kind of ready, and then everybody performs their particular emotion. And it was easy, of course, happiness, any sort of like dramatic ones were easy. Sadness was always kind of cartoony, but anger was one. Whenever I got anger, it was very difficult for me to do. And I realized that it was because I was always the one in the family, and my growing up as a child as the youngest child, was that I was the jokester. I was the one that wanted to smooth everything over. I wanted everybody to be okay. I would always want to fix it or make it okay or smooth it out or whatever. So getting angry, I always felt was a waste of time, and I'd really conditioned myself to just not get angry. And you'd think to yourself, well, that I was proud of that about myself. I just never really got angry. I was very easygoing driver. I don't get angry when I drive, all of that. But what happened was that I actually had a very underdeveloped anger. My anger was so underdeveloped that when I had children, and then when this happened, when things really would hit me, I would really lose my temper, and I wasn't able to really control it, or I wasn't able to really, balance it out. And that ended up, I think, being a problem. I think a problem as a parent. I don't think I was angry all the time. I'm just saying when I did, it usually threw everybody because they didn't see it coming. So dealing with all of this and then dealing with people's reaction to it was hard for me not to be angry and not to look at it and wish that things were differently and that they were different. I had my own issues of what I could have done differently so that he didn't take his life. But then on top of it, to have other people saying things like, I think people think that it's this dramatic, like the person knows that they're having these thoughts, and then all they have to do is pick up a phone and call somebody. It's like, I guess, like in the movies. I remember in Downton Abbey, there was I forget characters' names, so I apologize, but I love Downton Abbey. But it was the servant who, he actually attempted suicide, like right after John's death. And so I was watching it, and it was hard to watch. But it was also it was easy to watch after a point, because to me, it wasn't realistic. Because they just kind of like it happens, and then all of a sudden he's sad, and then all of a sudden a couple people tell him, oh no, it's okay, don't worry about it, and then he's okay. And it just doesn't work that way. I mean, it's just so much more complicated than that. And I think people expect someone to reach out and to give them a big, make it easy. Hi, I'm really sad. I'm thinking about taking my life. Can you come over and have a cup of coffee with me? It just isn't that simple and neat and tidy. And so I think there was also, too, a lot of people were surprised. I think they thought, well, then he must not have reached out because he didn't reach out to me. And the truth is he did reach out. He just didn't reach out to you. You weren't that close. And that's a hard thing, I think, for people to recognize, too, was that they realized that they just weren't that close to him. And I remember my pastor said to me early on, he said, you have to watch out because you're the type of person that's going to want to make people feel better about this. And, people are going to reach out and they're going to want you to make them feel better. So, just be wary of that. And I was glad that he said that to me, because I was. But and there are a couple of people that I did talk to that were friends of his. I knew I wasn't going to ever hear from again, but I knew he loved them and cared about them. But I remember one man in particular reached out to me, and he had played tennis with him, and he shared with me how he had really spilled his guts to John about all the things he was going through. And they were very similar to what John was going through, but John never said, yeah, I understand, I've been through that. Yeah, me too. And it was like, that was something that was really hard for this guy to kind of reconcile, that he had said all these things and that John didn't say, yeah, me too. Well, but John was just not as transparent about what he was suffering with. And it wasn't going to come out. And so he did tell me, he did tell people close to him. And I think that was the thing at the memorial service, was that there were so many people there. There were a lot of people that were there for me that didn't really know John that well, but were there to support me, which was amazing. But there were also people there who were in John's life that I think realized that they didn't know what he was going through and what he was struggling with. And they were thrown, I think, that they weren't that close to him. And it was frustrating a little bit for me, because some of them, I think, felt that he then didn't have anyone to reach out to. And I think that's a really difficult thing in this case of suicide, is that you realize that you thought you were close, but you weren't, and you weren't as close as you thought. And it kind of shakes your foundation. And so when you hear of these people and people want to step in and help, they drift away, or they're hard to be around. That's the call for help, is they're hard to be around. John was hard to be around because he had gotten so wrapped up in the coffee shop that he was, that was all he talked about. And that was his focus, and all his frustrations and everything that he was going through. That was all he would talk about. And when we would get together, he would be telling me, he would be talking and telling me and getting me an update. But to be honest, I didn't have much going on then. So it was okay. I would just sit and listen. And then times he would say to me, oh gosh, honey, I'm so sorry. I've been talking on and on about myself, and I don't know anything about, what's going on with you. And I would be like, and I was I'd be like trying to come up with something that, I don't know, to talk about, because I'd gotten so used to just listening. And then when I started talking about something, he wouldn't listen, and then we would be back to the coffee shop. So, but that's really when somebody gets into that, I think there were a lot of people that kind of shied away from him, because he was just going on and on about what was going on with him, and it was very one-sided. But I think that's the call for help. I look back on it now, and that's the cry for help. When somebody is just, and they can't see out. Now, if all those people that cared so much about him had reached out, a lot came to his coffee shop opening. If a lot of them had reached out a week before, 2 weeks before, a month before, a year before, if they had constantly contacted him and checked in on him to see how he was doing, told him how much they cared about him, how much he meant to them, would it have made a difference? I don't know, to be honest. I was there, and I was in the trenches, and I was trying to do everything that I thought I could do, and it didn't work. So, is it part of all the little heartbreaks that led to this? Yeah. The hundreds of them. Yeah, but if they had been different, would have been different? Maybe, I don't know. But, welcome to the world of suicide. It's just this big circle. and you're always spinning it. And then you're always coming back to the end of going, you know what, I don't know and I won't find out because it happened. I was also angry at a lot of his past. You know, I got him when he was 54 years old, is when we started seeing each other. There was a lot of stuff that went on before me and a lot of stuff that hurt him quite a bit. And he was, and did he bring a lot of it on himself? Sure. I mean, the addictions and the self-medicating didn't help his process either. So, he's not innocent of it, but there were a lot of people that did some things to him that he just never recovered from. And there was nothing we could do about that either, but I had to get through a lot of that. Because, there was this person inside that I got to see when he was sober. And I do feel like if some of the damage that had been done early in his life hadn't been done, then maybe that person would have been able to thrive. But, if my grandma had wheels, she'd be a trolley car. It's a crazy saying I heard once, but it's true. It's like you can sit and say, what if, but that's the bargaining stage. That's the bargaining stage. What if. And also the other side of bargaining stage is, okay, well, now that this happened, I need to make something good come from it. And I think that sent me on a path of trying to figure out how I can make a difference in the world, kind of in his honor. One of my favorite parts of Hamilton that makes me cry every time is when, at the very end, who lives, who dies, who tells your story. And when she says the orphanage, when they say the orphanage, that just, that really spoke to me. And then that kind of sparked my interest in Boys and Girls Club and to be part of the Boys and Girls Club, or just because he loved children. He taught Sunday school for a really long time, and he really loved being around, young children, because they just cracked him up. He just thought they were so funny. And I remember one time he was teaching Sunday school, and this is way before we dated each other, and I was teaching preschool and he was teaching kindergarten. And we had we didn't have many kids that Sunday, so we consolidated the two classes. And so I brought mine into his class, and he had this attendance chart. He was kind of famous for the attendance chart. He had everybody's names, and he would call each of them up, and he would say, so, hi, how are you? Oh, what a pretty dress, or, oh, what did you do this week? Or how are you today? And he'd talk to his little kids in his class loved the attendance chart. So he had heart stickers, and he would put it up that they came to, they were there. They put their sticker on the attendance chart. It was such a simple thing. But, oh my gosh, the kids loved that so much. So I had a little girl who was super shy. And I said, go on up. It's okay. He just wants to meet you. So go on up. So she went up to him, and he was sitting, and so he could be eye to eye. And he had bright blue eyes. John had the best, most beautiful, bright blue eyes. And he said to her, he goes, so what's your name? And she says her name. She says, I'm Natalie. And he goes, hi, Natalie. And he goes, I'm John. And so you're in the pre-K class, she's like, yes. And he said, oh, well, I'm so glad you're here. Well, I'm going to let you put a heart up here, even though you're not in my class and I don't have your name here, but I want you to put a heart here to say you're here. So he hands her the heart, and she says, the heart sticker. And she says, where did you get these heart stickers from? And he says, oh, why, the heart store. Oh my gosh. I still think about that. Her face, just the heart store. I mean, he would just do stuff like that. It was just crazy. So anyway, I wanted to work with children because I still feel every once in a while when I'm working with the Boys and Girls Club in the afternoons now, there's some kids that I just know he's looking at them through my eyes, and he would just adore them. There's just some that they're just the way their faces and everything would be exactly what he just loved about being around children. So there's a little bit of that, and I'm still figuring that one out on how I can help and make the world a better place and all of that. And I'm going to get back to that in just a second, but I wanted to tap into a little bit on the depression side of it. I saw a thing the beginning of this year. I was looking for images for my business. It said 2019 and for social media. And I came across one that said, 2016 changed me, 2017 broke me, 2018 opened my eyes, and 2019, I'm ready. And it really just sat with me because I went, that's exactly how I felt. I mean, that was it. That was just it. And what really hit me when I looked at it was the 2017 broke me. Because he died in 2016. 2017, the second year was the hardest. The second year was the hardest. And, I read that people say the first year's the hardest, but the second year's the hardest because that was really where, I just lost, lose the joy. You lose the joy in taking care of yourself. You lose the joy. And I lost the joy in making dinner for my kids. I lost the joy. If people canceled things, I was happy. I canceled things because I didn't want to go out. I didn't understand depression because I had never really experienced it myself. And now I get it. That's another thing. It's not like I'm sad and you all of a sudden feel sad. No, it creeps up on you and you just stop doing stuff. And all you do is want to sleep and you don't take care of yourself. And I wasn't exercising. I was barely exercising. Like I was barely walking around the block, much less eating right. I remember after John died, one of the lovely ladies at the church made me almond crescents, and she put them in this big, if I told the story before, sometimes I repeat myself. I don't go back and re-listen all my podcasts. The pretzel, a big pretzel, like Costco container. And I would, if you ate them, if you bit into them, then the confectioner sugar landed on your shirt. So I would tilt my head up like a seal, and I would drop the cookie in my mouth so that there'd be no confectioner sugar on my shirt. And I remember my mother saying to my kids at some point, I hope you guys aren't eating all these cookies because these were made for your mom. And the kids were like, we're not eating these cookies. And it was like, no, I was eating all the cookies. The cookies, the ice cream, everything. I really found out how much I had been managing my own addiction to comfort food. And it's definitely was an ugly secret of mine that I didn't realize I had. But now I feel like I've kind of come around full circle, and I'm kind of back to able to manage that, which is good. I'm losing weight, thank God, and being able to go on long walks. I've been going on long walks. But 2017 was really hard, and that was definitely the depression angle of it. Definitely, where it hits, because the spinning is exhausting. And I think at some point you just can't do the spinning anymore of just what if. And then you just have, when you stop, you just don't even know what to fill it in with. So working at the Boys and Girls Club definitely pulled me out of that. It was great because nobody knew really what happened to me, and I could kind of go and put my time in. I was good at it, so it just made me feel good, and it got me back so that I could get my business back in order and everything else that really helped me. So the acceptance angle of it, which I come back to, is one of the things I think that makes it very difficult to get to the acceptance stage when it comes to suicide, and why suicide is just different. I believe it's different, is that if you, and this is I'm still trying to work the wording, if you accept it and feel like, and move on, and then or even have things happen that you say, because of this, I'm better at that, or I'm more in tune to nature, or listen better, or I'm a better person because of this, then it makes what he did okay. And then you're like, no, it's not okay. And then you start that cycle again. So if that makes sense, it's like if someone had, what I believe is that if somebody had cancer, like my father passed away last year, he was 92, he was ill, he was failing of health, all of that. You get to acceptance because, dying is part of life, and we all know everyone dies, and he was 92, he had a nice long life, and you can kind of come to acceptance. With suicide, he took his life. He felt like he couldn't go on anymore. He was in a lot of pain. He may have, I believe, think that he was going to be a burden to all of us. He would do it again. He would be here again. I don't want to make his action right. It's not okay to take your life. It causes extreme pain. It devastates all those around you. It puts them in a constant cycle of just reliving and rethinking and trying to think on how they could have done things differently. It's not okay. So to get to acceptance would mean you'd have to get to a point where you can move on in your life and say, it was okay that I'm all right, or I believe in God, and I believe that God grants and permits things. And I believe God looked at John and said, it's time, because he's in a lot of pain. And in the grand scheme of things, it was okay to take him at that point. However, I still don't think it was right to do. And he still had a lot to live, and he still had a lot of his life to go. And I also am under the belief that it's not really our life to take. We're in this world for a purpose, and I don't know if it's really up to us to make that decision. It wasn't up to us to be born, so I don't believe it's up to us to take our lives. And so, not that I don't have the utmost compassion for the pain he was suffering. I'm just saying that it's difficult to get, and that might be what's really the hardest part of dealing with suicide, is that if you're feeling better, or if you feel like you can move on, or you want to move forward in your life, you don't want that to also mean that you think it was okay that he did what he did, or you accept it, or you agree with it, because I don't think I ever will agree that it was the right choice for him to make. It definitely happened, and I understand why it happened to a point, but so that's really the hardest thing. That's where it's the most, and that's it. And so that's what I deal with. And that's what I kind of carry with me, is that you never really kind of quite reconcile that. So I want to leave this. I know it's a little long today, but that's just because I'm wrapping this up. So I want to leave with one last story of what happened, which was nice, was my son Ian, who I told you about. We had that little thing with the trees. I was folding. I'll try and be brief with the story. I was folding my laundry, and I was looking outside of the window of my utility room. Is a window, and it was real stormy, kind of like how these crazy storms we've been having here in California the last month. But it was like a squall. It was like dark clouds coming in, and there was sunlight kind of underneath the big dark clouds, and the wind was blowing. And as I was folding the clothes, I was thinking about John sailing, and about how he used to always talk about getting into squalls and getting into trouble out sailing and barely making it back. I'm glad I was never on any of those sailing excursions. They sounded awful. So I was kind of doing that. And at one point I heard a dove cooing, and I I thought for a second, like, what's a dove doing? Why isn't a dove, getting cover? Because it was obviously stormy outside, and but not raining yet. So when I saw the sun underneath the stormy clouds, I thought, oh, you know what? I bet we might have a rainbow. I need to go outside and I'll look into our backyard and see if there's a rainbow. So I told Ian I was leaving, and I said, hey, Ian, I'm going to go outside and look back and see if I see a rainbow. And he said, oh, let me know if you see one. So I go out. I went out to the front of the house, and I turned around, and on the top of the house was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful white dove, bright white dove. I'll post a picture on my Facebook page. And I called Ian out, and we stood there for 15, 20 minutes looking at this dove. And it was beautiful. And I said, finally we had to go inside, so it was cold. So I said, okay, bye, Mr. Dove. Thanks for coming to visit us. And even though all the storm and the dogs going by and dogs barking and everything, this dove wouldn't leave. It just sat there and stared at us. So I said to Ian, I said, well, we got to go in. It's too cold out. So we started walking in, and the dove took flight and then flew over us. And then we turned around to see where it had gone, because we wanted to watch it fly away, and it was gone. So it disappeared. And I believe that. It just disappeared. And I've never, ever, ever seen a beautiful white dove around here before or since. So I said to Ian, I said, well, I've got to go in and Google this. So we Googled it, and sure enough, there's thousands of stories of people who were in the hospital bed of a dying loved one, and they decided they were going to go home and get some sleep, and the nurse would call if anything happened. And they go out to their car, and they get in their car, and the phone's ringing, and they look up, and there's a white dove sitting on the, on the hood of the car or whatever. I mean, there are thousands of stories like this. And so, you know what? One day I'll understand all of this. But the one thing that I do know is that he is at peace, and his soul is at peace. And really, that's all I want. In the grand picture, I can sit here and I can wrestle with this. And yes, adversity makes you a better person. And I do feel like I'm a much calmer, more understanding, bigger picture kind of person since all this happened. And as long as his soul is at peace, then I can do this, and I can figure this out, and I can bear it. And that's really all we can do, isn't it? So I want to thank you so much for sticking with me through these 3 episodes. And so now I'm going to start talking more about kind of current life and being a single parent and having my own business and Boys and Girls Club and all that kind of fun stuff. And I still do my Monday lighter side short podcast. So thanks again for being with me, and I'll talk to you soon. You're up in the sky, I'll carry you home to the mountaineers. And soon, my friend, you'll see them again, the ones you left behind, the ones you left behind. And I'll sing for you all the way home. But why does it feel like home isn't home? I've been in this war too long. It's in the air that I breathe, oh, it's in the trees. It shivers down my spine. It shivers down my spine. I just sing my song as I walk through the gate.
but she doesn't look the same. The fear in her eyes, I've seen it before, and she can't recall my name. No, she can't recall my name. And so I sing to her as I fall. A shimmering light as I hear